Chair recognizes Ms. Brown for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I first want to acknowledge the chairman, ranking member, and our witnesses for being here today. I would also like to say it is important to note that while in office, President Trump routinely vilified public servants across the government. He particularly antagonized what he referred to as the Deep State Department. Amid this tenor, the State's Department's workforce plummeted by 9% from December 2016 to March 2018. So, Ms. Shaw, can you tell us how the attrition at the State Department impacted the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program?
Thank you so much for the question. Our work over many years has determined that staffing has been an issue in terms of being able to keep pace with the number of applications. The work we published in 2020, I believe, recommended that an assessment be done of staffing levels. When we did a follow-up compliance review, we found that the staffing assessment had been done and some changes had been made, but the backlog still was not being wound down at a pace that would keep pace with the applications. And so we have ongoing work to further look at the way the program's been streamlined to see if we're finally seeing some of those positive effects.
To follow up, you mentioned the backlog. Was there a substantial backlog for the Special Immigrant Visa Application Program in 2020?
You know, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly where it was at that time, but I believe that what our work found at that time period was that there was a backlog. It has, of course, since been impacted by the evacuation.
For the record, that backlog had increased to 18,864. Another question. Ms. Shaw, what was the Trump administration's impact on other refugee settlement and support services relevant to the Afghanistan withdrawal?
Well, I can think of one context. We recently issued a report about resettlement agencies that the department worked with domestically to resettle Afghan evacuees. And what we did find is that the reduction in the number of refugees that was decided within the Trump administration had a downstream effect in that the implementers and resettlement agencies did scale back their resources, recognizing that they would not have as many people to serve. And then, of course, with the evacuation, we saw a huge surge, and so their ability to quickly staff up to meet that spike was one of the major challenges that we identified.
So would you say that the visa and resettlement program should have been contemplated as part of a successful Afghan withdrawal effort during the Trump administration?
I can't say whether it was or not, but I know from the State Department perspective, based on our work, that they did give some focus to it after we found that there were significant issues, including one of the most senior level positions to oversee that program. The senior coordinating official had been a position left vacant for several years during that administration.
I'll take that as a yes. I think it's fair to say then that President Trump failed to put critical pieces in place before aggressively advancing the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I want to close by asking unanimous consent to submit to the record a Twitter thread by Olivia Troy, the former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to Mike Pence.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. In this Twitter thread, she's replying to an assertion that Trump would have successfully evacuated all Afghan partners, and she wrote, and I quote, "There were cabinet meetings about this during the Trump administration where Stephen Miller would peddle his racist hysteria about Iraq and Afghanistan. He and his enablers across government would undermine anyone who worked on solving the SIV issue by devastating the system at DHS and state." She continued to say, Trump had 4 years while putting his plan in place to evacuate these Afghan allies who were lifelines for many of us who spent time in Afghanistan. They'd been waiting a long time. The process slowed to a trickle for review. Other priorities then came to a halt. End quote. Donald Trump and his administration knew full well that his withdrawal commitments were a recipe for disaster, but did nothing to address it. Those facts should not be ignored during our discussion today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.